Welcome to Searching for the Question Live. My name is David Orban, and I am very happy to have all of you following the show. We are streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, and you can be part by asking questions or making comments. I will be able to look at them and answer them live, making this interactive and making sure that we are also able to drive the conversation in those areas that are interesting for you. Recently, on another show, I also used a separate tool that enabled people not only to ask questions, but also to vote on questions asked by others. It went pretty well, so I may also adopt it here. There are many ways that you can participate in Searching for the Question Live, for example, by voting on the guests that you would like to see on the show. Also, you can sign up on the Discord conversational community that allows the people who are passionate about technology and its impact on society to continue the conversation among friends. I also invite you to sign up to my weekly newsletter that informs you on what I think about not as much current events by themselves, but what is the context really of the things that we are seeing around us. And finally, if you believe that the value that I am creating deserves it, I invite you to sign up to become a patron on patreon.com/David Orban as a fan, a supporter, a sponsor, or a benefactor. Various levels. So today we have a guest and a friend whom I have known for several years, and she's young enough to say I've known her since she was a child. Now that is just a little bit of an exaggeration, but I am very happy to have seen over the years our guest, becoming more and more active in various areas, and seeing her evolving both professionally and personally. Marta Ghiglioni studied law and technology, and her interests are at the intersection of how both must evolve, as a matter of fact, co-evolve. And also, what are the conditions that make it possible for certain jurisdictions to thrive? Why certain areas can take advantage of technological innovation better than others? What are the conditions for this to happen? This and many other things will be the topic of our conversation today. Welcome, Marta, to Searching for the Question Live.
Thank you, David. It's a pleasure to be here. Hi, everyone.
So one of the things that I play around at Searching for the Question Live is to show, as part of the context, that I am in Bergamo, Italy right now. And before we started, we established that you are not exactly in San Francisco, but pretty close in California, just south of San Francisco, in a place called Hillsborough. Yeah. And so, how did you end up picking Hillsborough?
So it's basically I'm here because the first time I came here, and then maybe we're going to unpack more about it, but it was a strategic spot to be very close to the airport, considering my life and my family's life. It's lived between Italy, US, and Brazil. So we needed the easy access to easy commute, international commute. that, let's say, nowadays is not being that strategic anymore, but we are loving the green areas around the house in these like complicated times. So yeah.
Yeah, and for those who have never been, Northern California with San Francisco obviously is one of the technology capitals of the world, and San Francisco is at the northern tip of the peninsula of San Francisco Bay, and all this area until you arrive at San Jose is what is called the Silicon Valley. So there are all kinds of very famous cities and companies, from Apple to Facebook and Twitter and Google, that have their headquarters here. And when you land with your plane, you then rent a car and either go north to go to San Francisco, or you go south to these other places. And then you pass and you can say hello to Marta as she's right across.
Right across.
Learned. So the first time Marta and I met was through the global contests that Singularity University would organize with local partners that aimed at selecting bright young people who then would spend their summer at Singularity University, at the NASA Ames Research Park, also very close to the places that we've just shown. And you were one of the winners. What year was that?
It was 2016. The 1st of April of 2016, the day in which I won the April School. I will never forget that day.
Oh, okay. I didn't remember the date. And does that mean that you were kind of suspicious? You were not sure if we were going to tell you, hey, it was all a joke?
Yeah, no, I remember calling some of my friends and be like, hey, I won this thing. Like, I'm going to California. And they were like, yeah, no, this is an April Fool's. Like, it's not real.
Well, it wasn't, and you went, and so I apologies for labeling you a child at the time. But what was funny is that you didn't finish university. You still had to get your degree, and very diligently then you came back and you did finish and you did get your degree, right?
Yeah, it's like, let's say the very last things are on work in progress now. So I'm like, let's say it's a complicated situation, but let's say that I'm on the verge of finishing. When I arrived in Singularity, I was at the 3rd year of university, and I had already finished and come up with all the exams of the 4th year already. I was just missing the 5th year. And after having went to Singularity, I kept studying. I never stopped, actually. But just the interest of what I was studying was just much broader than only what university was offering me. And sometimes the system is not that well equipped to incorporate all of your interests. And so I chose this like parallel approach in which I was continuing studying and writing my thesis and everything, but still working full time, multiple jobs sometimes, and studying and keeping up with both law and tech. So yeah, I'm like very well on the end of this journey with university, but I see my education as a more holistic thing. Not that I don't believe in university, of course I do, but I did decide to draw my own.
Of course. And I think that is very appropriate. I was very happy when Google and others actually announced that a college degree wasn't an absolute requirement anymore for being a candidate to find a job. It was kind of a very blind and short-sighted selection criterion. Even before, lazy, let's call it a lazy reason for discarding a candidate. And of course, if you don't apply that as a filter, well, you as a recruiter or as an HR person in the company have to work more. But the non-standard path that more and more people are following in order to find how their passions and talent appropriately intersect in order to be able to deliver substantial value in the places and the teams where they get involved is very important. And the more enlightened companies are now embracing that.
I agree with that. Just to add a little thing, I do believe that there are certain jobs that totally require a certain level of education, and I'm not discouraging anyone from studying or getting a degree. I guess what I'm trying to say here is that if you work in the intersection between something like technology and something like law, I am not a lawyer. I never claimed to be one. I worked in law firms, but not as a lawyer. And I think it's all about being cohesive and coherent with yourself and looking to create value. And I had the great opportunity of creating value very early and show what I'm capable of doing. And the people I've worked with can see what I'm able to do. Like also in law, even if I'm not yet there, but I do want to say, and I do want to encourage the fact that I am still working on that, and it's going to be done very, very soon. But yeah, it's a journey. It's a journey. So
many of the guests of the show are in some ways related to Singularity University as advisors or faculty or people who attended the SU courses, but I realize we never actually commented on the experience itself. So maybe you can tell a little bit about that. How was your summer at the NASA Research Park?
Of course. So after as I mentioned, I won totally unexpectedly their scholarship, because it's like imposter syndrome, like on steroids, when you're competing for something like the global Grand Challenge scholarship. I arrived in Silicon Valley, and I remember I had talked to a lot of different people trying to understand what should I expect, and I did got this hint that was like, hey, get ready and start sleeping now, because you're gonna see that you see, you find me directly there, because you're gonna see that the experience is gonna be the sleepless university and not Singularity University. And that is because basically they gathered together for the program that I attended, that was called the Global Solutions Program. They gathered together 80 people from, in my year, 40 plus nations around the globe with very different backgrounds, with very different stories. And they asked them to gather together and learn about each other and learn from each other, and at the same time get education from some of the smartest people that lived and worked either in technology or in technology, in entrepreneurship, or in human rights or global grand challenges. And what was mind-blowing to me is that I was among the youngest in my class. I was 23 at the time, and no one was really valuing that or taking too much into account that. Like, I was all of the sudden thrown into this world in which it doesn't really matter where you come from or what you know. It's just like who you are and what you can bring at the table, and how much do you really want to do this? How much do you really want to use technology for the good? And stopping having these discussions about technology only about the problems of technology, but also about how to solve the problems of technology and how to solve the problems with technology. And I think that was like a shift in my mindset that I didn't have access to before. Even if I was a very positive person that loved technology, having really the chance of putting that into a mindset for so long was really, really interesting. And after the first 10 weeks in there, I also got into an additional program that was piloted that year. So I stayed for longer, not only 10 weeks, but I did a total of 6 months seeing always the same people and living out of NASA, working on a startup project. And that was really transformative. Like, I can remember like one day bicycling to my office inside of NASA, living inside of NASA, and thinking like, hey, I'm like actually here, this is happening. Like, the people that are here are gonna be successful all over the world, and like it's really incredible. It was,
and this was the SU Labs incubator program.
yes, it was.
Yeah. The NASA Research Park is a wonderful place. Really, very unique in the mix of various kinds of futures that are intertwined. The future that the space program of the 70s promised and didn't quite come about. Also, a future of the 50s nuclear nightmares that luckily didn't happen. Because there are the nuclear shelters almost in every building where you are supposed to be saving yourself from the bombs that would have completely destroyed everything, of course. But also current technologies and current experiments, both in space and in other areas. So extremely stimulating and very, very welcoming. More recently, SU had to actually leave even before the current changes, which actually persuaded Singularity University to become completely digital, with no more physical events being organized even after the pandemic is over. At least not at the California location. Even before this happened, SU decided to leave the NASA Research Park because it became too complicated to welcome people from all over the world in a location that technically is a military facility. It's a military installation. So it just became not practical to have and ask permission for half of the students or more that could be denied, and sometimes actually was. Yeah. So after you went through these 10 weeks plus 6 months, you came back to Italy. And maybe jumping ahead a little bit, you became the director of ItaliaFintech, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes.
So tell us about it. What is ItaliaFintech, and what was your job there apart from being the boss?
So when I came back from Singularity, I was still in this like mix between I'm a law person, but I like technology, and I want to find a sector that really, really benefits from it. Like, I do know that like in the long term, I want to work more like towards like ample areas of this intersection, but I did know that there was something that was the fintech sector in which these two topics are very, very connected, because there's no financial services basically without regulation. Of course, there's the difference of Bitcoin, but like in a traditional way, massive products that arrive to everyone are only available for the ones that are regulated somehow. And in my first experience, I was in UniCredit, and in UniCredit, I got the great chance of working in the venture capital firm of UniCredit. And there I got the chance of meeting a lot of these startups that were operating in Italy, and they were having these massive challenges in being that present as the government and in general institution needed to be in order to explain themselves and really allow to be understood by regulators worldwide. And so what we did is I quitted my full-time, like tempo indeterminato, as they call it in Italy, job in UniCredit to join the startups. and creating what is called ItaliaFintech. That is a trade association of Italian fintech startups. So the startups that operate in Italy and have these like transformative business models that need to be addressed and explained through a separate conversation, or at least with a separate seat at the table. What was happening before is that, for example, in the payment industry, there was a little subsector inside of the organization of the payment that was talking also about digital payment. We wanted that to be relevant. We wanted that to be prominent and to have all the different voices inside. So we were working on crowdfunding, for example. We were working on wealth management. We were working on payments. And I like to define it as a huge experience for me personally. Like, it was amazing for me to see what different companies were thinking and how we could work with different institutions bringing real value, and how many small things we could change that were having a positive and immediate impact on the industry. And then from like a more broader perspective, it was very interesting to see what was the thirst for innovation also inside institutions, and that this innovation was brought with a dialogue that was constructive and interested and informed. They were really keen to listen. They are really keen to listen. And this was like 2 years experience, like very full on, very, very interesting to have.
We will look into this in a little more detail, but I want to go back to the remark that you made, because those who are not acquainted with the Italian work culture may not have picked it up. When you said that you left a permanent job, it is the only equivalent in the US is something like the tenured professorship, right? When you are safe and secure and you can do everything almost, and you will never be fired. So that is the dream of Italian parents when they say, please, when you grow up, go and work in a bank and find a permanent job in a bank. Yeah. It is extremely secure. And also UniCredit is one of the largest banks in Italy. One of the largest ones in the world, so it is also guaranteed under practically any condition not to go in bankruptcy anytime. So the question is, do you believe that the seeds of this craziness were already in you, or was SU a major component and catalyst in turning you into a person that could make a decision that everyone else in your at least Italian surrounding felt is absolutely crazy?
So I do think the seeds were definitely in me since the very beginning of always. Like, I am a person that has always tried to work with what I really want to do and where my energies are the most let's say implemented. At the same time, SU showed me I was not the only one. So before SU, I was kind of always feeling like maybe I'm doing this just because I want to risk, maybe I'm just adrenaline addicted. I want to always more, and I'm an overachiever, and maybe that is bad. What Singularity exposed me to is a culture in which if you want to do more, and like if you have a feeling that, let's say, I was also young enough to believe that if I want a full-time job, I can look for it maybe a little later on in my life. And I wanted to take advantage of the fact that I was only relying on myself to really experiment. And I'm glad I did, because UniCredit is a great work environment. I didn't have problems working there, and I didn't quit because I was desperate to go somewhere. It was an opportunity. And when I went to talk also to the people inside and say, hey, they proposed me this thing, I don't think it will happen to me another time. Like, to be the face been a young woman, a young Italian woman, being the face with regulators of fintech startups in 2017, 2018. It was like not common. And so I was like, let's take this stand. Like let's do this.
It was kind of a judo move.
Yes, it was, yeah.
So,
but yeah, Singularity for sure made me feel less alone, like for sure.
Yeah, and it is a common effect for those who participate who maybe felt out of place in their community at home, and were wondering how far in the bell curve of normalcy they could afford to go. And then when they were at SU, they would recognize that there are many other people who are in similarly extended positions in the distribution of at least thinking and sometimes behaving. One can be and still be recognized as a very positive force and encouraged to do the things that they do. So talking a little bit more about ItaliaFintech, you said that it was thrilling to realize that there were so many little things that could be achieved, and that they would have concrete positive impact in the ability of the various companies that that belonged to the association, and maybe even beyond, because even those who didn't were not part of the association would benefit from these changes. So, and you also mentioned the unexpected sight of a young woman leading this in front of the regulators. So, how was that experience? Because I personally have almost no experience trying to make regulators do something that they don't realize they should be doing, and what it means to be able to support your arguments and persuading them on one hand. And on the other hand, isn't Italy known, as some other cultures too, for the kind of provincial thinking that is hard to corral in a common front, like in an association that must represent everyone's interest, and then in this kind of united position go and achieve what you want to achieve. So these two aspects, what do you say?
Yeah, these are two very, very interesting, like right to the point questions. So starting from the first one, I never did that before. Like, I was not a person, usually people that work in associations, especially with a higher ranking inside of them, they have gone through cursus honorum. Like, they had a career that is mainly with working with other associations. I didn't do that. So I entered with like the naiveness and the belief that, like, if you want to do something positive and you study for it and you prepare yourself and you interview people, then you can really bring that knowledge where it's needed. So that was my idea. And the approach we had in ItaliaFintech when I was leading it was like to gather the people that wanted to know about fintech and proposing them content and explaining to them before advancing our proposals. So we weren't going somewhere asking for something. We were offering knowledge. We were offering our point of view, and really trying to make regulators understand what we were talking about, rather than just present them with a piece of paper and be like, hey, we need this to be approved, or this would be approved and would benefit XYZ people. We will have that. Like, we had that ready. But the important thing for us was to be able to explain and to bring them on board and to show them and to make them familiar with the topics, because it's normal. Like, if inside of some institutions, it's hard to catch up with like what's happening inside plus what is happening in the innovation side. And they felt they needed a reliable source to dialogue with. And I would like to think that that was the case for ItaliaFintech, and is still the case for ItaliaFintech now.
And you found them ready to learn at the same time?
I do believe that even institutions, likewise as companies and every type of organization, is made of people. So one of the other things was to be able to find the people that were the most keen to learn and that were in the strategic positions. And that was, of course, where the majority of the first 3 to 4 months of my work were focused on, like trying to identify these like people that could be our first leads, and they could be our speakers for our cases, but not just because they owed us something or we owed them something. That was really a narrative in that type of job that I really wanted to change, but more because they really believed in what they were doing and they saw the benefits of it. So in that sense, I think being a person that wasn't relying on staying in the same track of work forever helped me, because I was not feeling the pressure of saying or pleasing or like doing things the traditional way, just because that was not my goal. My goal was to make the job done. And that's what I like to think I did. And in these first 3 to 4 months that I was talking about, where we were cherry picking the people to get to know and to inform and to talk to, I also did a lot of the work with creating an environment inside the association in which it was safe for everyone to say what they thought it was important for their company, but also to understand that fintech in Italy is such a small sector. Like, it's growing, it's solid, the services are amazing, but there's so much of the traditional sector that is still that can still be eroded somehow, like that can still change. They are not going to steal customers from each other. It was about creating a safer market for everyone to work with. And we were not doing a lot of marketing type of things. So we weren't promoting necessarily one against the other. It was more like, let's show that we can be in the same room and we can have the same interests. So let's not personalize our interests that much. Also because these processes with like regulators and like putting together documents, it's a slow process. And sometimes you need to have resources just to focus on that. And not everyone has. Even if you are a big startup, maybe having someone else that is going to back your proposal is going to help. And so we were working in these two directions. One was like, if you had a specific need that the others were neutral about, so they didn't have any specific anything against it, but you could bring that on and we could help you making the case. And then the second case, if there was something that everyone was recognizing as a problem, or that some of us were recognizing as a problem, then we could gather together and try to bring that forward.
So, based on your experience, regardless of the particular technology sector, vertical sector, and maybe regardless even of the jurisdiction, the country of reference, what is the right attitude for a regulator that must strike a balance between protecting existing infrastructure while welcoming innovation and creating a policy framework that is constructive and allows innovation to take place?
That's another very, very interesting question. Let's say that regulation is always about mitigating risks and allowing for action. It's a very thin balance. I'm thinking about fintech right now, just because regulation has such enormous impacts on different aspects. We could think about bioethics. You could think about many different sectors of our life in which technology is
AI explainability or bias in AI algorithms,
exactly.
Self-driving cars killing or not killing people, and
devices, or like discrimination with
yes.
technological methods. So privacy, like there are just so many things inside of this. Focusing on fintech specifically, the line that one has to draw is where how to measure and how to make sure that the customer is doing what they know they are doing. Like, how do you know that the customer of a fintech startup knows what he's doing, as well as how do you know that a customer of a bank knows what he's investing in? And on the other side, how do you manage security? And there are all of these topics that are just super, super complicated to manage for a regulator of a traditional industry usually. What is different and what is changing now is that we are realizing that in Italy especially, somewhere else things are happening, and things happen in innovation with or without the allowance sometimes of regulators. And people realize that they can have services in a very easy to use way through their mobile phones for everything. So they expect that from the financial sector too. And I do believe that the best way is to have official channels and structured channel, informed ones, to communicate with the industry. And special divisions inside of these regulators to better understand and to get in contact with the industry. And I'm seeing that happening right now. Like, other than CONSOB, that has traditionally these commissions and divisions that work closely with startups, now also Bank of Italy announced that they're going to open a special division that is going to be based in Milan, that is going to work on innovation with the sector. And this not only the innovation is done only by startups, of course, it's also done by banks. So that's a very transformative moment, and I do believe that this cooperation is the only way that we can move forward in the regulatory policy industry, and to have an approach that is scientific to it. So usually when you do a regulation, the lifetime of what you write is so long before it gets approved and then it gets into force that it sometimes is not relevant anymore. So shorten that period of time in which you need to implement something would be a great benefit. And secondly, to track and to monitor how something is going on, like we do with startups, like a test, and keep seeing what's happening, collect data and feedbacks so that you can reiterate that in the next phase. And that is happening sometimes in some regulations, also in Italy.
Part of my recommendations when I happen to be asked about this is to make sure that as much as possible, laws and regulations contain sunset clauses, so that the stakeholders are forced to reconsider whether the existing framework can be reapproved, or taking into account what has been learned in the meantime and how technology evolved. The framework needs to be updated before it can be once again put in place. The other comment that comes into my mind, as you mentioned, the scientific approach, is that indeed we do have parallel control groups because in particular, Italy, as part of the European Union, proceeds in a given manner where the ability of any member country to be radically different from the others is limited. But on the other hand, we have US and Chinese examples, or even smaller jurisdictions like Singapore or I don't know, a Caribbean island that feel that they can diverge more. And then a few years later, we can ask ourselves which is working better, and maybe be inspired by the best examples and implement them as they are being adopted. Specifically, how do you think blockchain and Bitcoin regulation is going to evolve, especially in the view of China introducing the central bank digital currency experiments, which in their case, being an experiment, is just used by 300-400 million people, not more. So is that going to potentially accelerate similar ones in Europe or in the US?
So the discussion around cryptocurrencies have grown I would say exponentially in the last 4 years. Like I remember when I went to Singularity in 2016, we were like 3 people into the blockchain space. And that same year in November, there was a boom of the whole industry and we all started talking about it. And since then, we have seen also not only the public become aware of blockchains, but also regulators and institutions and financial institutions becoming aware of it. For sure, China is a great example. At the same time, is let's say a local one for what, like not considering it a global blockchain. That is what is really like a global cryptocurrency. That is what is really transformative around things. So we can look at blockchain as a technology, and so like we can look at it like a tool to make faster transactions, like faster international transactions, to communicate currency between different countries, and to, like, let's say, do research on how to overcome the current payment system and the current structure of the payment system. And in this sense, also European Union is looking towards more digital finance solutions, and it's looking into blockchains, and it's open forums on how to potentially implement it to create what is a so-called stable coin. So a coin that would reflect the value of a currency and would just use blockchain technology as the underlying technology to make that flow through countries and citizens and so on. On the other side, there is cryptocurrencies. There is a technology built, like it's a product somehow built on top of.
And sorry, I just found this.
Yes.
I don't know if you were aware.
Yes.
October 2020, there is a report on a digital euro by the European Central Bank. So. This will be.
It was also recently published a strategy, a fintech strategy by European Commission on how to innovate digital finance. So it's a topic that has been inside of regulators, not only nationwide, but also European Union and many others. And the main difference is if we are talking about cryptocurrencies, or if we're talking about this distributed ledger technology, as we call it today. And so talking about more the cryptocurrency side, it's a phenomenon, and it's also these days the prices of Bitcoin are kind of becoming interesting to many of us. If there are any nerds of Bitcoin connected, I'm sure you're having a kind of interesting times these days. But on the other side, you have also initiatives, like one of the biggest propellants, I do believe, to the dialogue within regulators about blockchain solutions has been a Facebook announcement of Libra.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying that because Facebook got the approval for payment initiator back in Ireland back in 2017, late 2016. So they did say that they wanted to get into the financial service area, and then they just used that for small transactions and for charity purposes. And when they announced that they were starting this Libra project, there was going to be two different projects that were related. One was like the network that was connecting different operators and allowing for transactions and to exchange value between different countries seamlessly. And on the other side, they were creating the wallet that was able to manage this. Calibra was called. That was able to hold and to share this currency. And this was something that really, really opened the conversation also inside of the G20 and the working groups within them.
Let's call it panic. That is the best word.
I like a conversation, but yeah, panic is like, it's more because once you have such a big operator that states that it's going to do it, then it's real. Like, it's not only a technology, it's not only knowing that something can happen, it's knowing that you might be already there and that might happen pretty soon. At the same time, if Facebook became big enough not to be able to just go for it without any regulation in place. So they have adopted a lot of also public relationship and relationship with institutions in order to explain how the technology works. At the same time, we saw last year something interesting. So the consortium that was supposed to create Libra, so the network that was sharing this coin, kind of, I don't want to say fell apart, but lost some of its key members, among which, for example, PayPal, that just recently announced that they have their own services now, that they were approved to allow people to have cryptocurrencies inside of their wallets in PayPal and to exchange it internationally. So there is this like two-line interesting debate right now inside of the industry between let's have like the traditional cryptocurrencies or like create new ones that are private or create new ones that are public or backed by institutions. And I do believe they're all going to coexist. I just think we're going to go towards a system in which money are going to have a purpose. You're not going to use the same money to do everything, and you're going to have different wallets for different purposes. And so maybe Facebook.
And if I can interject, the Calibra, the Facebook wallet for the Libra platform was called Calibra, and now it is called Novi. I didn't know, so I went to novi.com, and there's a form, get Novi first. You fill in your name, your email, and then they ask you, where do you want to send money? So I'm saying, well, I want to send money from the United States. And then I was asking myself, how masochistic do I want to be? Should I really select Iran, for example?
Oh, yeah.
And I said, okay, well, let's not be that masochistic. Why don't I select Pakistan, which is, a friendly country?
There's not.
It's not in the list.
Yeah.
It's not in the list. So how can Bitcoin not win?
It depends for the use. I do believe that. I do believe that Bitcoin wins for the use that Bitcoin has, that sometimes is not even the same for every customer of Bitcoin, for every user of Bitcoin. But yeah, for sure, when you want to be inside of a regulated environment, you have to onboard countries. And to onboard one country, you have to have the others that are somehow happy with it or that are helping you with it. So it's a conversation, and I do believe that we are going to go towards a more open and more global framework for regulation. If I can be a little visionary right now, I do think the trend is going to be bigger regulations that cover the technology itself around the world. I don't know in how many years. Maybe it's going to take 10, maybe it's going to take 15. We don't know. But technologies are the same everywhere, and we can access them everywhere right now. So it's going to be very hard to keep this.
I really hope that there will be a safe space for unregulated financial speech, where I can transact without pretending that an all-seeing entity has need to know. Right? There can be perfectly legal and substantially private needs for financial transactions. And we are totally running the risk of this not being accepted with regulators pretending that those don't exist. In Italy, for example, first, with the excuse of combating tax evasion, and now with the excuse of stopping the spreading of COVID, cash is really being demonized, and it is illegal to use cash for 2,000 euro or maybe now less transactions, which is pretty extreme. it is pretty extreme. And I remember receiving from my bank a pretty plain communication a few years ago. Somewhere I have the screenshot that says, we are happy to inform you that for your own protection, in case you want to withdraw more than 5,000 euro in cash, or to make a wire transfer, a bank transfer of more than 5,000 euro, you will have to justify the reason for the transfer to your branch manager, who then can deny permission, which is pretty extreme as well.
So let's say there are two different layers of this. From one side, I do believe we need to incentivize the use of digital currencies, especially in a country like Italy that has a very low adoption of it right now. And that is also because it's just way easier, and the cost of managing like currency is very high. And sometimes we don't realize the security. Like, I have a lot of elderly friends, or like my grandfather's friends and so on. And there's this belief that like, if you withdraw money and you have them under your mattress, you're more secure. And especially for that demographic, is not necessarily you are going to withdraw money from an ATM and then you're putting them under your mattress. Like, that perceived sense of security by having something that you can touch is just not there. From the other side, we do know that Italy has like some hidden economy, let's say, that like, of course, there's a need to battle. On the other side is a choice. And as I was saying, I do believe we're going to have a more, a less a more structured and a less strict and like a more flexible solution for regulation in general when it comes to technology. Meaning going more for principles rather than going for point-by-point cases that are always going to leave out something, and we are always going to find a way around things that is not really helping anyone. But yeah, it's the balance between regulating something and control and safety. Control and safety is one of the balances that is always very, very relevant in creating new policy. Yeah, I see your point. I guess I see your point.
We only have a few minutes left, but I want to touch on your current phase, which is in the US, back again. And if I'm not mistaken, it has just started also, you know, with the complexity of the current situation with the pandemic, of course. So ideally, what would you like to be doing in the next phase of your professional trajectory?
So in 2016, when I came to Singularity, I didn't only meet my crew of people, the people that I wanted to hang out with and to be inspired from. I also had the luck of meeting the one person that then became my husband 1 year later. And so back in 2017, we were like dating long distance, doing like these crazy commutes, San Francisco, Milan, even just for the weekend, even just to see each other, till the point in which we decided to get married. And we got married in Milan at the Museum of Science and Technology. It was kind of a statement to our love for science. And since then, I've kept working in Italy because I'm a professional and I do want to invest in my career. And he is like the most supportive person on that front ever. And at some point last year, I started feeling the urgency of being together. Like 3 years of commuting and everything, it was like getting impossible to keep being apart. And having the full-time commitment with Italia-Fintech that was really like keeping me busy most of my days, I just decided to advance, like of course in advance advise them, but to dedicate all of my energies to that transition. So I didn't start thinking about what was next until that chapter was over, because I needed all the potential energies I had in that moment to still keep going with the activities that we had and deliver on someone that could follow me. And I'm super happy to say that there's like the association is still up and going, and they're still doing amazing things. Since then, I've then decided to join the board of a startup called Walliance that does real estate crowdfunding. And it's the first one that was doing that in Italy. We just opened in France, and there are plans to expand in Europe and maybe elsewhere. And with them, I do more of the strategy side, and we work still with regulators, and like we still do what some of the stuff I was doing in ItaliaFintech. And on the other side, I'm super grateful for the opportunity of working with a young and empowered team. And what we do is very, very interesting, actually, like making everyone being able to invest in something like real estate online in an easy way. We design user experiences that are super accessible, and I'm super, super happy to be able to partner with them on this project. And on the other side, I keep consulting. So I also consult for a startup called Impact On, funded by Meg Pagani. And what she does is they look at best practices of impact around the world and how to scale them internationally. So if you have a great project in, let's say, Latin America, why can't you replicate it in India for, like, I don't know, recycle of plastics? And with them, I look more at the legal side of things. So how do you replicate something from like one environment to a very different other environment? And so I'm keeping myself busy. I consult also for other startups, and I'm doing this type of things right now because my original idea was, okay, I'm going to have 3 months at the beginning of 2020 just to travel. That, of course, was not a great idea. If I had seen the future, I wouldn't have probably made that decision. And in fact, I didn't travel. I ended up staying home and working with these startups and really having the time to look into the things that I wanted to study. So right now I'm also almost to publish, self-publish, a research on social media bias and regulation. So on how we moderate social media, what should be the regulation behind it, how governments should approach the regulation of social media. So if doing a co-regulation, if leaving blank spaces, and this type of things. So I'm keeping myself busy with different sorts of things.
How can we be sure that we know when this research, which is very timely, is available?
I'm gonna make sure I really, really put it out there. So either Twitter, LinkedIn, website. It's just interesting timings because the more I write about things, the more things happen. So I'm kind of confused on like when I should call it a day. And I'm sure I have one of my best friends. I told her like at some point, just like call me and say, hey, stop. Like,
that's right. That's right. And then, of course, you can always update and or have a community that follows your further remarks. That was then, and then this is how it is developing. So everyone who wants to follow you can go on Twitter to be alerted about the things that you do, as well as the availability of this research on social media bias and regulation. Marta, thank you very much for being with us on Searching for the Question Live.
Thank you for having me, and have a good day, everyone.
Bye. Okay. So thank you, everyone, for following Searching for the Question Live. The guests here are always very generous with their time. And it is always great to see their enthusiasm, their passion, their talent, and the projects that they are investing in. The show notes that you can see on YouTube in the description of the episode have the various URLs of the websites that I am sharing. So in a few hours or maybe tomorrow, you will be able to go back and see the references to the various projects and websites that we mentioned. I want to also invite you to subscribe not only to the YouTube channel where you may be following the show today on youtube.com/David Orban. But if you speak Italian, I also have an Italian YouTube channel. And the easiest way to find it is to go to davidorban.com/YouTube Italiano. And you are welcome to subscribe to that as well. There is a parallel show called Qual è la domanda? That similarly to how we are doing here, but in Italian language, calls guests to talk about technology and society. And if you feel that what together with my team I am creating is of value, I invite you to come to patreon.com/David Orban and support us by becoming a fan, a supporter, a sponsor, or a benefactor of Searching for the Question Live. Thank you very much, and I will see you in the next episode.